I do think at a young age I realized how good he was at his profession because others were constantly coming to him for advice or guidance or coming to watch his practices. You know, I remember there was a group of coaches, they would meet at the Shawnees all the time in Hoover and, you know, just sit there and talk baseball. And I remember as a kid, you know, when the game was over here, we would drive to the Shawnees and there'd be 4 or 5 other high school coaches. And all those guys would be asking my dad, well, what should I have done? Or this happened, how should I handle this?
Back then, you didn't have about 5 or 6 coaches, and we coached everything. It didn't matter what he coached. I mean, he also coached basketball, freshman JV basketball for several years, and he was successful. And the biggest thing, he won the kids over. The kids loved him.
He had a famous saying that I always remembered, and it's being used now on the speaking circuit, and that saying is, you win the kids, and the kids will win the game. He knew how to work on that self-esteem, but not affect self-worth, and he built players up. And therefore, his players would do anything for him. They go through a brick wall, and they still come back. He probably has more people that come back to see him than any coach I've ever seen.
You know, I think more than even winning championships, for me, it was more about playing for this legendary man. I mean, I liked baseball, but I loved Coach Dunn. You know, and I played in college and played afterwards. So because I love Coach Dunn, I love baseball.
I would have done anything for the guy. People say, oh, you're a Vestavia guy. I was a Sammy Dunn guy. If he would have been coached for Russia, I'd have put on the uniform. Okay, that's just the way it is. And I think most of the guys that played for him felt the same way.
I was going to be the baseball coach again in the spring of '78, and then I was fortunate enough to be hired as a head football coach in late January, early February of 1978. And Coach Reynolds, who was our athletic director, said, Coach, you probably don't need to do both football and baseball. What do you think about Sammy as the baseball coach? And he hadn't coached baseball yet. He was going to be my B-team coach, and I said, I think he'd be great. And he said, well, you need to talk to him and see if he wants to do that. So probably the easiest interview I've ever had in hiring somebody was, I said, Sammy, would you like to be the baseball coach? Yeah, I think I would. So, end of story. That was his first year in the spring of 1978.
Vestavia baseball was Dad's program. You know, if you talk to the guys that played on those original teams, he truly built this program. It wasn't someone else's that he took over, but it is a program that he built. You know, those early groups talk about when practice was over, forming lines, not to run, but to walk the field and pick up rocks, as they were trying to create a field that was safe to play on.
When he took over as a baseball coach, this field was just in very, very raw stages. And so everything was dirt. And we'd planted some grass to come back, but it wasn't completely there. And I asked Sammy when he took over, said, do you want to play your games at Wall Park and wait another year? No, we're going to play it here at home. And I can remember coming out here, and Coach Reynolds would be out in right field with a tractor. They would be playing games, and he's cutting a swell where the water could drain off. They had to have special ground rules. If the ball came close to the tractor, they just called it an automatic double, you know, so it was unique.
To see him remembered as truly the builder of this program is neat to me. You know, just the building of the baseball tradition within this city, from the little leagues to You know, his summer camps were massive, you know, the things that he did for the youth in this community.
The building blocks of that program, he built it on toughness and tenacity. We were fighters. We approached every game as a fight. And I always felt like we were run up going in every game we played, just getting off the bus, because of the way we were prepared. Any place we showed up, we were going to be a hard out. I think if the New York Yankees were driven by here from spring training, I would expect to win that game. And as silly as that sounds, that's just the way he built that program.
Every year we played in the Hueytown Invitational Classic. It was the top teams really in the metro area or whatever, and we were one of those. We were down late in the game to Hueytown, and our first baseman, Chuck Tarter, hit a grand slam to win it. I'll never forget that. We didn't lose a single game, and he had never won that thing before. And I think that as time grew on, he always told me that we laid the foundation for the teams in the 90s that, you know, that started winning everything. And that was comforting for me and my teammates to know that.
My freshman year, we had a very talented baseball team that I was an observer more than a player on. I played a little bit, but not much. The state playoffs set up in a different way, and it was much harder to get that run. We had a tremendous team that just didn't make it that year. The other 3 years I played at Vestavia, we did not have great baseball players. We had some great players sprinkled in amongst some really tough guys. And what he accomplished with those guys was every bit telling what was coming, because when he started getting players, this was going to be a landslide. I mean, it was that obvious, because we didn't have that talent top to bottom yet. So in '87, my senior year, we did not have a deep team at all. We had a handful of seniors. All of a sudden we make a run and we make it to the state playoffs. First team to ever make the state playoffs here. We got beat in the first round. We got one hit off of Hueytown and got embarrassed. And that was the introduction to Vestavia baseball into the state playoffs. Back in those days, the county tournament ran parallel to the state tournament, so Hueytown got kicked out of the state tournament. They lost the next week, so they got put in the county tournament. And we beat them in the semifinals and won the county tournament. That 87 out there, 1987 sticker, may be the most meaningful, because that had to be the least talented team that he won a championship with, and we were a very good team. But it was not based on talent. So the building blocks were there. And then after that year, I think the next year they went to the semifinals, and then it just started that run, you know. It got into the 90s and it started rolling.
They set the tone in the 90s, finished runner-up in '88, and they had been in the Final Four in '89. Well, then '91, I think, was the first year they won the state championship. And they won, except for one, they won every year in the 90s.
We won 2 state championships, lost one by 1 run, then won 7 in a row.
And I remember the first one they won, I got down on the field with Coach Dunn, and he was asking his players then, can you get me back? Can you get me back? He was already planning ahead for next year, and he had just won it that night.
The streak of the single elimination games is just overwhelming, you know, and it's something that truly will never be done again.
Well, people don't think about that because they think it is like it is now, all 2 out of 3. It was not 2 out of 3.
That begins to get a little bit eerie when you start talking 30 some odd single elimination games. That's when you know that you've arrived.
We've eliminated that process in our state because it usually did not allow the best team to win, because all it took is one bad day or one bad performance. And that's the thing that's amazing, is that not only did his teams not have bad days, but individuals didn't have bad days.
Any statistic I've ever heard of any sporting team is the most impressive, because any given night, right, you can run into that guy, that arm, that bat, whatever, you can make that error, and they avoided it.
I had young boys at the time, and we came up here all the time and watched the games, and Vestavia, it was just a machine.
The first couple years that they won it in 91, 92, those years, you know, we were in 7th and 8th grade, so we worshiped those guys they were our idols. So when we came up to the high school, it was just like playing for Bear Bryant to us in Vestavia.
I was in 9th grade and Coach Dunn asked me to mow his grass, and it was such an honor. I mean, I remember my friends were like, oh my gosh, man, I can't believe you're getting to mow his grass. Like, it was a huge deal.
The atmosphere up here was unbelievable. I mean, none of this was here when I played. I mean, we didn't even have lights. It was so much fun to come up here and watch and see how good they were, because they were great at every position.
It was incredible to see them put in that shrink together and to see this place change. There was nothing like this here. I mean, this is just weeds. And then you come here for these championships and there are literally thousands and thousands of people, I mean, almost in the trees, watching this program. And it became almost larger than life. And what was great about it was he was able to continue to build on it and get better and better. And not necessarily better players and not necessarily better teams, but there just became a psychological edge. You could see that when Vestavia showed up, this is going to be a problem.
You know, we did not have the most talented kids during some of those. Now, there were a couple of years we had some studs, but those other years, there were some years we did not have many talented kids, but my goodness, they played to perfection. There was just a commitment to excellence. He was the most fundamental coach I've ever seen. Little, small, intricate details. And where he was a master, I think, was practice. Sammy loved to practice. There were years that we didn't have 18 or 20 games. He loved to practice. He believed you got better in practice. He believed he was really shortchanging kids if they played. He goes, it doesn't take a coach much effort to coach a game, but at practice, you got to get after it.
I remember the first day of practice every year, he would hold up a baseball and say, this is a baseball, and here's how you hold a baseball. And by him doing that, he was letting us know he's not taking anything for granted. He's not assuming that we're coming to him with any prior knowledge. He left no stone unturned.
We started every year, I was at Vestavia, in left field, learning how to play catch. That's a true story. We learned how to play catch. I remember thinking to myself, he didn't think we can catch. But it wasn't about catching. It was about catching the way he wanted you to catch. It was about throwing the way he wanted you to throw. And then that built into, I'm going to teach you how to field a ground ball. And the repetition was laborious. And then you realize later, looking back, that's why we won. We fielded ground balls and made throws. We caught balls thrown to us. We didn't miss relays. We did all these little things that made average teams really, really good.
He had something called play perfect. And you would start out with T-ball, and you had to get 21 perfect outs. And of course, at the beginning of the year, you might get 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. And by the end of the year, they'd go out there and knock out 21 perfectly fielded ground balls and throws.
Practices were intense. They lasted a long time. You get into a game, games were a piece of cake because we were so prepared for anything that could possibly happen in a game. Mentally, we didn't make mistakes.
I remember laughing as my college teammates were struggling with a practice or struggling with how many hours we had to spend, and I remember thinking to myself, this isn't half of what we did in high school. One of the major designs of our practice was to make us uncomfortable, always, every day. To put pressure on us, to demand a lot of us, so that when we got to the games, it was just show up and play. We had already been under more pressure than we thought we could handle.
Games were a day off when that 6th inning rolled around and you were playing a great baseball team. The plays were easier. The pressure just wasn't as much as it was in practice. You've done it 1,000 times. That's why it was so great. That's why they won.
His coaching occurred before the game. It occurred in practice. I've never seen somebody able to instill confidence in people like him. I've never seen a coach able to get the most out of his players like he did. I remember those last several years. I mean, we'd be behind, maybe in the 7th inning with 2 outs and maybe behind a run, and our kids are walking around like, we got this, we got this. I've never seen that kind of confidence.
Some of my very best friends were on some of those teams. They tell stories of being down 2, going in the bottom of the 7th, and him saying, we get it going, we're gonna win. The first guy gets on, they win. I mean, it was just that confidence of, if he said it and we could do it, it happened.
I think we knew back then that if Coach Dunn was your coach, you just expected to win. You know, he was such a winner. And I think the other team knew that too. You know, there's so many times where you felt like that you had the game won as you showed up, that the other team was already intimidated and they were going to be the team to make the errors and make mistakes, and we just kept doing our thing.
There was always a respect for the opponent about, hey man, you know, this is baseball, they can beat you. You have to respect the game, you have to respect your opponent. But at the same time, there was also the mentality of when you get off the bus, you step onto the field, they need to know that you're the best team and that you're about to win. And he was able to create that air of confidence without allowing complacency or arrogance to set in.
Sammy had a way of just making things happen. Sometimes probably didn't look the soundest, but he got the kids to believe, and because the kids believed, it was able to work. He just had that knack of knowing how to push the right button.
He could push you and push you and push you to a limit you didn't know you even had. But once he figured you were about there was something that he could sense, and he could just build you right back up, and he would have you ready to run through a brick wall for him. He was a master at that.
Every day at 2:30, we stepped on that field, he flipped a switch. He became somebody else, and when that switch was off, when we came off the field, it was completely different. He was loving, he was caring, he was funny, he was playing practical jokes. He made everybody feel a part. As a coach now, that's things that I often think about. And how do you balance being demanding, holding your players accountable, being a master of the details like he was, as intense as he was, but yet let those kids know that you love them and you care for them. And he was an expert at it.
Coach Dunn it's a weird group because you love this man so much, but you really, when he yelled, you were scared he was going to kill you. The level of intensity was incredible. I think he could require so much for you because he poured so much into you. I think the most we ever ran was a double header, and I'll bet we ran 50 foul poles after the game. Everybody's throwing up and the parents are watching it, and at that point Coach Dunn was kind of a celebrity, so all the dads were this is awesome. We ran till we threw up, and then and this is typical Coach Dunn. We went into the locker room, and then he told us at the time, crying, he was saying, me and Linda were never able to have another kid, and so you guys are my family, and just showed us how much he loved us. I don't know, I just remember those moments, and I think about them all the time.
My junior year, we had a great season, ranked in the top 10 in the nation, had a great season. In the very end of the season, we lost a few games where we were getting ready for the playoffs, and we had a couple bad nights. The first night, the Tuesday night, when we lost both ends of a doubleheader, it was a tough night. We stayed here running till about 1:30 in the morning on the school night, which would be unheard of nowadays. So then 2 nights later on Thursday, we lose again. And I remember coming to the locker room, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if we were going to make it through the rest of that night. But he comes in the locker room and he tells us, guys, this whole year, I've known that you are the best team in the state of Alabama. I've known you're the most talented team. And my job as a coach was to just push against you and fight against you and push you every day, even to the point of making you possibly mad at me as a coach. And he said, and you know what, now the regular season's over, and now instead of pushing against you, I'm about to come around and I'm going to push with you. And we're about to go win 7 straight games and win the state championship. And that's exactly what happened, and we did. We never lost again, won the state championship.
For some reason, towards the end of my senior year, I was just struggling a little bit defensively. And where he could have hammered me and put pressure on me and probably driven me further into worrying about things I don't need to be worrying about, that's when he flipped the switch and built me up and told me how good I was and how important I was, and probably lied to me about how good I was. That's who he was. He didn't coach everybody the same, but he coached everybody fair. And before you know it, it turned around and I was back to normal, and we went on and won the state championship.
He was able to be as intense as there's ever been. I mean, people can't even, it's hard to even describe the level of intensity that there was. But at the same time, a second later, he could turn the switch, and all of a sudden he is telling a joke. And he can lighten the mood, or he can go right back the other way, and it can go bad again quick.
A junior year, we were playing Huntsville, and we were down in the 7th inning. We were down by 2, and Joe Denson gets up, and I was on deck, and I remember telling Joe, just get on, I'm gonna end it, which didn't happen. Coach Dunn comes up to Joe, and I was expecting some great hitting advice or something, and he just says, he looks at him, he says, loosey-goosey, and then he pinched him on the chest, and we were like, what? And Jeff was like, I don't know, and he started laughing, but I guess he knew that Joe in that moment needed to just relax, and so he kind of laughed. And then Joe gets up there and hits a 400-foot home run walk-off to win the game. He was legitimately the funniest person I knew. So When I was a junior in high school, there's a guy named Kevin. Senior year, we're practicing like right in the middle of the year. Coach Dunn was screaming at Kevin. He said, "Barb, you're gonna get me arrested." And everybody was like, what do you mean? He goes, "Barb, you're gonna get me arrested and convicted for murder because I'm gonna hit a fungo and it's gonna bounce up and it's gonna hit you in the face and kill you." And when they put me on the stand and asked me, they said, "Sammy, did you know that he could not field when I put you and I hit you that fungo? I'm gonna have to say yes and they're gonna lock me up for life." So there's just tons of stories like that where it's like his comedic level was just through the roof.
He taught driver's ed, and he used to have an office that was in our gym, and I'd go in there sometimes and I'd walk in there and his batting helmets had just come in that he had ordered. 2 girls came in to ready to drive, and this was their first time driving. He says, "All right, girls, get your helmets on, let's go." And they said, "Sir?" He said, "First time drivers have to wear a helmet." And I'm about to crack up, and I'm trying to hold it in. And these girls reluctantly grab the helmets and they go outside and get in the car. And as they drive off, they have the helmets on, and Sammy's turning and looking at me and like to explode, laughing so hard. I mean, he just had a tremendous sense of humor.
We have a hawk or 2 or 3 hawks that live here in the trees around the baseball field, and you could be in practice and it's intense, and the guys are nervous, and he's hard on us. And all of a sudden, if that hawk started flying over the field, he would just stop practice no matter what was happening. And he would take his hat off and put it over his heart, and we would all follow his lead, and we'd be sitting here singing the national anthem to that hawk. He was a funny guy, and he was a very nice guy. He loved huge. He had a huge heart. And one thing I think about is, I guess about 7 or 8 years after I've played for him, I had a little sister that played softball and basketball at Vestavia. And while she's in high school, she gets sick and spends about a month in the hospital, finds out she has Crohn's disease, and which she's doing well with that. But during that time, Coach Dunn and Mrs. Dunn go to the Galleria, go to Build-A-Bear, buy her little teddy bear, and they go down and sit with her in the hospital and give her that teddy bear. And I was just thinking about, what coaches do that. That right there showed such a special way that he loved with such a huge heart. But it wasn't just me, so many players, so many former players have those same stories that he truly loved his players. And that's why you were so willing to give everything you had for him.
I eat breakfast with a guy regularly who played on one of my dad's first teams, and he reminds me of when his dad passed away, how my dad brought the baseball team to his house to get the grass ready for the visitation for his mother. Bill is, in his late 50s and still remembers that. Like, it is a vivid memory in his life right now from something that happened as a freshman in high school.
There are times in my life when I was struggling in college. I got in trouble my freshman year in college at Alabama, and I got in some trouble, and the next day on a Friday morning, Coach Dunn is there sitting in my living room crying, saying like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna figure this out?
When a player graduated, he became their friend. And that, here again, these kids coming back to see Sammy years and years and years later, it's just something special. And a lot of times coaches don't have that impact. They have that impact while the kid's there, but they don't necessarily have the impact, when they're gone.
There's not a day that goes by that I didn't think about a life lesson, a fundamental on the baseball field, how I carry myself, who I represent, like all those things. I learned from him. Second to my dad, no one shaped my life more than Coach Dunn did.
I was able to turn my life around, and I met the Lord and got saved and sober 14 and a half years ago. And if not for Sammy Dunn, it wouldn't have happened. I don't think I would have been on the straight and narrow path.
You talk to young coaches and you talk to veteran coaches, and they see what happens on the field and what happens off the field as 2 different elements. Dad didn't see it that way. He saw it as the things that we can do within our program, the things that we can do on the field will carry over as we leave the baseball field. I know Dad truly believed that so much of what we learn and we do in athletics and we can learn through competition carries over with us. And when we talk about his focus of things off the field, but how can I use the game of baseball, how can I use my platform to teach them what hard work is, to teach them what commitment is, to teach them what loyalty is about, to teach them how to relate and to overcome stress, to overcome challenges. You know, all the obstacles that we have in the athletic realm, Dad believed wholeheartedly that these are things that are going to help these guys succeed when they leave our program. The ABCA Hall of Fame selection is something that was really huge to our family. And it shows just what this coaching community in the state of Alabama is about. You know, Dad actually is only the second coach from the state of Alabama to go into the ABCA Hall of Fame. You know, the amount of coaches who wrote recommendations and did things just really means a lot to us, to see how much, you know, people care about making sure that his legacy continues to live.
You know, a lot of times in Alabama, you didn't get a whole lot of recognition for baseball. Most of that recognition was sitting in Florida, California, whatever. I believe that Sammy really put, you know, Alabama baseball in the limelight nationally. It was an honor to serve with him, and I served with him for a long time.
His legacy and his footprint is all over this place. You know, it's, in some ways, it's just like you blink your eyes and say, wow, that was neat.
I'm happy for Casey and Miss Linda, and I mean, that family just made a lasting impact on our community.
He's a Nick Saban of high school baseball. As far as I'm concerned, there's nobody better than, or ever will be. He deserves everything he gets. He meant so much to so many players. He touched so many people.
He was my best friend, okay? He was my best friend. And he was very good to me as an assistant coach. He treated me like an equal.
We all love him dearly, and to see him get recognized continually for the success he had just means so much to all of us, because he definitely deserves it.
I think his legacy is in the text message thread that I had with 10 of my teammates, just talking about stories of Coach Dunn, and talking with Coach McWaters on Friday night, or any of my old teammates. I think that legacies live on in the available fathers and great dads and business people and brothers and sons that he helped make. He was the most accomplished man on the field, but he was a better man off of it.
I drive by his sign every day, and I'm reminded of things he taught me, practices we had, drills we did, conversations we had, and I feel a responsibility to him and his family and all the guys that came before me and played with me and came after me, just to do it the right way.
Most of the guys, especially in those early years, didn't move on to college or professional baseball. I mean, they moved into careers. Just seeing the amount of appreciation that they had for my dad and the impact that he had on their lives, and how much they credited him for the success they were having in the business world or in their personal lives. And I realized quickly, being his son, it's like, my dad's got a lot to give me. When my dad was going through cancer treatments and kind of in his last weeks of his life, and being there and being with him and my mom and seeing all the former players come back and hearing the stories of appreciation, it was overwhelming. I tell people all the time that the amount of people that he impacted is staggering, and in big ways. You know, I think all of our coaches and people that we spend that much time with, they have an impact on us, you know, either positive or negative. But the major impacts, the life-changing impact that I think my dad was able to have on so many that came through this program, is a true testament of living out God's plan in his life.
In March, actually, my brother-in-law was in a really terrible accident. He was on the first state championship team. He had his 3-year-old son in the woods, and a tree fell and hit him. Broke every bone in his upper half, and they were both in a coma. And I asked Jeff a couple of weeks ago, I said, like, you know, what was that like, you know, laying there, you know, feeling like you're gonna die, you know, and he probably should have. And he said that he thought about Coach Dunn as he's laying in the woods by himself, that he had been physically pushed to the brink before, and so he knew what he was capable of. And he said, yeah, I think that saved my life.
know the things he didn't get to do. A few people know he had accepted and taken the Alabama coaching job in baseball. I mean, think about that, University of Alabama hiring a guy out of high school to coach there. He had numerous opportunities throughout his career, and to see his commitment of staying where he was and doing what he did and finishing off with such success, being recognized nationally now, it's just an incredible thing for a great guy and a great friend and a great family. I mean, I think about him all the time.